It's nearing the end of the season, and some of my plants, like my broccoli and this large sunflower stalk, it's time for me to clear them from the garden, and that can be a bit of a challenge. So usually I've used big loppers like this, which can only go a diameter about 2 inches. So this year, let's see if I can find a better tool for the job. Well, it definitely makes more of a mess, doesn't it there? Believe it or not, this is a mini chainsaw, which sounds unconventional as a garden tool, but crazier ideas have worked really well. So this is from Smart Saker. Let's open the box and see what we find. This is the Saker Mini Electric Chainsaw, a 4-inch cordless electric chainsaw. Let's see what's in the box. All right, this looks like the battery, and this is the chainsaw here. So small, but it has this little safety ledge up and down. You can see my battery's going to go right there with the button to click on. Just looking at it there. My charger and a couple tools. Wrench, a screwdriver, and that looks like a little bit of oil, probably for the chains. And the most important part, a chainsaw. I don't care that it's 4 inches. That kind of scares me. I've seen some bad hand injuries. So the first thing I'm going to do before anything else is read the instruction manual. Also reading, there's some caution warnings on stickers on it. And some of it, so no use by minors. Don't cut wood more than 4 inches, okay? Please fully charge it and store it if you're not using it for a long time. And this one I like. It is forbidden to contact any part of the human body with the chain under the working state. Otherwise, it will be injured. Well, fair enough. I don't want to do anything that's forbidden. Now, nobody loves a manual as much as my husband. So, come on in here. All right, you ready? You've been waiting for this.
Yes.
Get your glasses. Here's mine. Here's mine. All right, let's get to work. All right, I've read the instruction manual. In fact, I've read it twice because I wasn't sure that I got everything the first time. And I'm feeling pretty nervous about this. You know, chainsaws are no joke, and I have not used a chainsaw before. And this instruction manual only has 5 and almost a half pages of instructions, and nowhere in there is it telling me what that button is, what that button is, exactly how to use it, if this should flip up or be down. It's all rather confusing to me. So I don't feel that I know how to use this safely yet. So that's my first feedback of this tool that I really want to like, because the very nice people at Smart Saker reached out to me and asked my opinion of it. But I also want to feel really comfortable when I'm using a power tool like a mini chainsaw. So my husband has a manual for a different kind of chainsaw. I might look at that to see if that gives me enough clues to be comfortable using this. The other thing is I'm going to check the internet, because this little instruction manual, while it's what came with this mini chainsaw, may not be the only one that's been written. So if there's something with a bit more detail, I'll feel a bit more comfortable. So let's see how I do with that. It's a few days later, and I'm not really any further ahead. I scoured the internet. I reached out to the company looking for clearer instructions on what to do with this and how to operate it safely, and I have come up empty-handed. I still don't have a clear indication or diagram of what these buttons do. I do have instructions that I should be using 2 hands with it, So I think that the instruction manual may have been copy-pasted from something else, because this very clearly to me looks like a one-handed tool, and all of the diagrams look like it's one-handed. The battery, I was told to charge the battery, but don't charge it past the point of it being full, which makes sense. There's a light. I can assume that green means it's fully charged, but again, that's not in the instructions. And the instructions seemed like they were translated into English without a native English speaker reading them and making sure that they were accurate. For example, at one point it says that you should lubricate the entire chainsaw. I don't think that's true. I don't think I should be lubricating the handle. So I'm still fairly nervous to use this because I have not used a chainsaw before. I'm not really comfortable with things like kickback, those sorts of things, and I really feel like I needed some proper instruction to be able to use that, which unfortunately was not included in the instruction manual. Now, my husband has used chainsaws before. He understands electronics a little bit more than I do, so to get a bit of nuance into what he thinks of this chainsaw, I'm gonna flip the camera around.
So here's what I think of the little chainsaw. Overall build quality isn't too bad. It's decently rugged plastic. The battery pack feels okay, but it's definitely like a brittler, harder kind of plastic than other tool batteries that I have. There's like the little sides of this thing, you can push on them and it gives quite a lot when you push on the sides of the battery. So it's not super confidence inspiring. There's cracked plastic on the one edge of this. Where the screw goes in here, it's clearly been over torqued. So quality control doesn't inspire a ton of confidence. It seems like, if I'm basing this on other chainsaws, because the manual, again, like my wife said, is not great. It's like they took a manual for somebody else's saw and just sort of tried to fit their bits in between it, and it doesn't translate well. This looks to be the safety switch, and then you pull the main trigger to get it to go. It seems like it has some sort of a safety guard here. You know, in the manual it says use two hands, but kind of be hard pressed to do that. So clip it in there, and right off the bat it won't go if you just pull the main trigger here. You have to push this side button first. That unlocks the trigger for it. But it certainly seems to spin anyway. It says to oil the entire chainsaw again. We'll put a little bit on the blade here before we use it, because that's where it should go. Other chainsaws will actually have a fill port where you have a little spot where you can add oil as you're using it, and you don't have to use the little bottle every time. So that's maybe a little bit of a downside to it. Although with such a small bar and everything, maybe it doesn't need a ton of oil all the time. We will see.
So even before I do the chainsaw, let's just compare with my tried and true method, which admittedly doesn't work that great for me all the time. These are pretty heavy duty pruners. I get a lot of torque on them because they open up almost 180 degrees, but certainly when I get to some thicker stalks like these sunflowers, it can be quite difficult. So this is about 1.5 inches around for a sunflower. So if I was going to chop it off, come down here, get around, and oh! Try not to drop it on my tomatoes that are still there. So that's my status quo. All right, let's give this chainsaw a try. So let's put the oil on. Now my husband tells me that usually the oil with chainsaws is a lot thicker than this. I don't actually know what kind of oil this is. There was a note that on trees you should use vegetable oil instead of mineral oil. This might be mineral oil. I'm using it on sunflowers that I don't intend to regrow, so I think it's okay, and not enough that I'm really worried about soil contamination, but if I was doing this a lot, I probably would. So, all right, we'll just dab a little around here, hoping that this is the right thing to do. And then, of course, I missed that part in there, but I'll assume that that's okay. All right, so on like that.
Clip in all the way?
Okay, clip it in. Okay, and yeah, that doesn't work unless I, okay. Gonna get that all ready to go. Ooh. Well, it definitely makes more of a mess, doesn't it there? You know, when I can't use my clippers, I can see the attraction, but as a garden tool, I'm not so sure. And when you look at what's left behind, I have a pretty clean cut from my loppers right here. Not that clean a cut. I was having some trouble getting it level with the ground here. So I've got more sunflower root sticking up on this one. So if I hit it this way, then the motor thing gets in the way. So I think I have to do it kind of upside down, like that. Okay, all right, let's give this a try. It's a little awkward now to get my hand to do it, but oh, which makes me nervous. There we go. You know what? That actually was a lot smoother than the first try. So this sunflower right here, I don't think I can safely get at it without hitting the side of my bed here. If I'm coming this way, the motor's in the way. Going this direction, I just can't reach. So I'm gonna try the loppers on this one again, which it's not that easy to do the loppers either. The loppers I kind of have to turn upside down. Oh, my sprinkler behind me. Ah. If I got better with this in certain applications, maybe it would be easier than the loppers. Whew. That went. This has got this in the way. Which, I mean, I think it's okay. Yeah. Yeah, that one was okay. This one. Yeah, like, oh gosh, like that, I guess. All right. So after trying it a couple of times, it does work, and it got a lot less messy. It wasn't flicking things up at me, so that's probably some user error for the first one. So yeah, I don't know. I think I have to think about this. It uses less force than the loppers for sure, and it doesn't need the whole big wide space to go at them. I'm going to hand it back over to my husband to compare it against his existing chainsaw and see how it measures up to that.
Okay, we're gonna get to doing a couple of little tests here. The first thing was when I picked up these two batteries, I was like, these weigh pretty similar. This one comes in at 368, 369 grams. This one comes in at 317 grams-ish. This one's only rated for 1.5 amp hours and 27 watt hours. This one's rated for 40 watt hours and 2 amp hours. So for the same footprint, you're getting less power out of that. Given that they weigh the same, one would think that they would give you about the same power, but there's clearly more extra electronics in here. Like this one, for example, doesn't charge by plugging in directly to it, so it's missing some of that electronics. So some benefit to not having a dedicated charger in that you don't need to have another piece of equipment around. So this one's like the standard battery that comes with most of this brand of tool. It's just 2 amp hours. They have everything from 1.5 all the way up to 6, 9, even higher. They get bigger, obviously, as they go up, but this is pretty standard for this tool brand. These ones, I didn't see that they had any other options for that. So if you were doing a lot of work, you'd probably end up going through a lot of these batteries, because I know these ones don't last very long on high torque tools. Like I have an orbital sander that really eats through these batteries. We'll see how this goes. We've got a few test pieces to cut through here. I've got a very thin piece of pressure treated wood, a little bit of a thicker piece of cedar, and a larger, it's basically a 2x4 that has been cut in half. These are just some scraps I had laying around. Just want to get an apples to apples comparison to this other chainsaw that I have. It's a Remington, it's a 14-inch AC powered, so it plugs directly into the wall. You do have that limitation where you need your power plug. One big benefit that this has is it actually comes with a guard that covers this when it's in storage. This little guy, well, it does have a little sort of top cover on it. There's no way to protect that chain. So like if I go to set this down, it's just gonna scratch whatever it's sitting on. It doesn't come with a cover. So this one's definitely easier to store. I just pop this on and I can lay it down wherever I want in the shop. Again, it's got a similar mechanism for getting it started. There's a thumb safety and then a trigger that you pull to get it going. For the oil, this one has a dedicated oil port. You fill it with standard bar oil, which is much thicker than what was in the package for the other one. And you just put it in there, and then when you need a little more oil, you just push on the bulb and it squirts a little bit onto the chain as it's going around. The next part that's significantly different are the operating manuals. This one is maybe eight pages generously, given that the back is blank. This one has a total of 28 pages of safety instructions, guides to how to use it, everything from how to safely tie up the power cords to like, there's an entire section on how to deal with kickback and why it occurs, with great pictures that tell you exactly what they're talking about when you're dealing with these things, which especially for a slightly larger one is more of an issue because there's more power, there's more chain moving around the bar, and so it has more chance of grabbing and kicking back with more force. But the same information would be very helpful. It has a very clear diagram that explains what the controls all do and what all the pieces of the equipment are. And then, even just a thing where it talks about essential terms and definitions, really basic stuff. They tell you if you're basically a complete beginner, how to safely use these tools, because they don't want to be liable for people making mistakes and having problems from that. There's very detailed guides in here to cover all sorts of situations that you might come across. Obviously this is a little bigger because they're talking about different trees and things like that you might come across, how to cut off limbs of a larger tree, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more detail. And so that is definitely a factor in how thorough the company has been in designing the product, and the manual doesn't inspire a ton of confidence. So I'm just going to put these out of the way and we're going to get it set up here. All right, so we're going to start with the smallest one first because I figure that's the best way to go about it. We're just going to clamp this guy down here. So we're going to clamp this down here, and we're just going to take a couple inches off with one and then a couple inches off with the other one. That way we're dealing with basically the same situation. So this is fully charged, except we cut 3 sunflowers down with it, which took all of about 20 seconds of actual use. So here we go. All right, I'm gonna have to clamp it down here. Yeah, and it doesn't work. Like, it feels like it should be one-handed, but you can't just switch hands easily with this, because the safety switch is clearly meant for somebody with a right hand. So if you're left-handed, you're kind of SOL with this, which is similar with the other one, because they only have the safety switch on the one side, but it is, not an insignificant thing to have to do. Yeah, it seems to go through pretty easily. I didn't notice any problems really. I should get a second clamp here. We've got our second clamp here, and we're going to give it another go. It's not too bad. Definitely works in both cases. Can't say I noticed that much of a difference between one or the other. It's a little easier to control the big one perhaps, just because it's got 2 handles and it gives you more stability when you're trying to cut something. Okay, here we go with the little guy again. Typically you're supposed to have it all the way up against this little guard here. That's why it's kind of got some teeth on it. That way, as you push it in there, it doesn't slide around. Yeah, it's making pretty good work of that 2x4 here. The cut's reasonably clean. I mean, it tears out a little bit, but that's kind of what all chainsaws do. Yeah, you can see the chain on this one's a little bit coarser, so it definitely gives a worse cut on there. Again, neither of them are having any trouble going through these pieces, so. All right, let's try this one again. This is a little bit thicker. It's kind of, I would say, this is probably the max of how thick you'd want to go with it, and it's probably 2.5, 3 inches. Like, you really don't want to be cutting near the tip of the bar. It's doing a pretty good job. So, as a little chainsaw, I mean, it certainly seems to do a decent job. I mean, tested it for 30 seconds, it seems okay, but, you know, if we really were doing a stress test on it and trying to cut a whole bunch of stuff, I'm not sure. Definitely could come in handy if you're cutting things that are at the edges of your property where an electric chainsaw doesn't reach out there. Tight spots, maybe you've got just one branch you want to cut that's in the middle of a larger tree, then maybe that would make more sense to have something like this for that. There's certainly times when we've needed to cut a limb on one of our trees, and using the loppers, you can't pull them open far enough to reach them, and so, you know, you'd have to get out like a hand saw or something like that. So this definitely would solve some of those problems. So, I mean, in terms of price point, I think this is about $130. We'll put the price up on the screen here. When you compare it to, you know, the cheaper plug-in options or even some of the battery-powered chainsaws that are available that are more full size, I'm not sure if it's a great value or not. It certainly is compact, but again, it doesn't come with something to store it properly with. The manual's not confidence inspiring, and the build quality is okay, but there's definitely, they've cut some corners with the plastics that they've used. You know, the stickers aren't seated properly on the tool. There's a lack of information about what the things are supposed to do. So, you know, for a beginner, I would definitely say this is probably not what you'd want to have. Because it's so small, you feel like, oh, it's just like a drill, but there's a lot of torque that comes from something that spins around like this, and it doesn't say in the manual, oh, you know, wear all your safety equipment and be careful of this, in a way that makes sense to somebody who's just beginning. The guidance that they give is poor at best. I would hope that they could come up with a better manual, or at least have some supplemental videos or something online that would show you how to use it in a safe way, because trusting that people just already have experience is not really a great idea. If you ended up with a problem with one of these, I would be curious to know if the company would actually back up the product. So, is it going to replace a full-size chainsaw? I don't think that's what it's designed for. There's places where this makes a lot of sense. You can take down, you know, medium-sized trees with this, no problem. But it is bulkier. You know, there's a length to it. You can't get it in certain spaces where this, you know, is half the length, right? Like the whole blade of this thing is the same size as the little guy. So it definitely has that advantage. So I think, you know, chopping small branches off of trees, using it for pruning, cutting things that you maybe can't fit the bigger loppers on would be good. I also think that it invites a certain level of familiarity and safety and confidence that maybe it shouldn't, given that it's very clearly, it's like, oh, I should use this with one hand. It seems to invite you to try and climb up and reach something way high up, because you can just use it with one hand. But that's very not safe in terms of chainsaw safety in general. You shouldn't be getting up on a ladder to use a chainsaw, period. It makes me nervous that it is so portable. If it's not stored properly and you have small children around, this could also be very dangerous. Like any tool, but even more so because of how exposed the cutting surface is. Overall, kind of like it. It is a pretty useful little tool, but I don't think this should be marketed at beginners. It's definitely better off for somebody who already has an arsenal of other tools and wants to just fill in the gaps, because, you know, they've got some unique situations where this comes in more handy. It definitely saves some speed. You don't have to manually saw things if you're getting up into a tree or you're trying to get a branch off. It's definitely got that advantage. You can get in underneath, around, through things that you wouldn't be able to with a regular saw. So I think it has a place in the arsenal of tools, but I don't know that it replaces anything in particular.
All right, I've had some lessons from my husband on how to be a little bit safer with these, which I wish I'd gotten from the manual, but we've said that a number of times. Now let's see how it does pruning some suckers from this big tree trunk over here. Okay, some of these ones in here. Yeah, so this is a tight spot where it's nice to have this tool. Not bad. Okay, so let's do some pros and cons. Pros, this is lightweight. You can maneuver it into nice little spots like that. It's got a battery that charges directly onto it. You just plug into the battery and it charges. You don't need a lot of bulky setup for that. It is pretty easy to use once you figure it out. Cons, you have to figure out how to use it. There don't seem to be any online resources from the company or resources within the manual that come with it on exactly even what the buttons do, even really simple things that I think should be included with any kind of power tool at a minimum. Another con could be some of the craftsmanship, the plastic, like my husband was talking about, and the fact that it doesn't come with an easy way to store it. Now, yes, you can store it just standing upright like this, but if you were going to have it on its side or if it knocked over, you could easily damage something or injure somebody. So overall, I'm really glad I got to try it. Thank you very much to SmartSaker for sending this to me, and it has its place for sure in my garden. However your garden grows, keep growing as a gardener.